Howdy everyone, today I'll be testing the most expensive piece of kit I've ever tested. I have with me a copy of the Sigma 300 to 800mm f5.6 EX DG HSM, affectionately known as the Sigmonster. It's for full frame or APS-C cameras, where this beast has an unmatched zoom range, taking off where most telephoto zoom lenses finish at 300mm and ending up at an incredible 800mm, while still giving a usable maximum aperture of f5.6. It weighs an impressive 6 kilograms, not including whatever heavy carry case you'll need to transport it, and it's over half a meter long, not including the deep lens hood. It costs an eye-watering £5,500 or $8,000 US. Considering its prohibitive price, you might ask why I'm reviewing this lens. Well, although it's expensive to buy, some people might be interested in hiring this lens for whatever crazy project they've got on the go. Also, I couldn't actually find a detailed modern review of this lens anywhere at all on the internet. And finally, who wouldn't want to test the Sigmonster? It's a Goliath, but quite an old piece of kit nowadays, so let's see if it can still perform well. Firstly, let's get a bit more of a handle on that zoom range. Here's a scene shot on a standard zoom lens going from 24mm to 70. The Sigmonster starts at 300mm and then zooms all the way into 800mm, where even on quite a good tripod, the wind will cause some shaking for you. On an APS-C or cropped sensor camera, that view will be even tighter, the equivalent of 1280mm. So the lens is potentially useful for nature photography, and it's possible to use it for sports photography or even extreme portrait work. At 800mm, your background really vanishes. The lens's maximum aperture of f5.6 is a little dark, so this isn't a great lens for stopping action or shooting in dark situations. However, considering the zoom range, f5.6 is quite impressive and just about usable. Remember, at 800mm you will need a very good tripod and fast shutter speeds to get sharp images. You can forget about shooting this lens handheld. Only the Terminator would have strength enough not to require the services of a very steady tripod. As you can see here, obviously the lens is very big and it's made of metal. Although it's pretty tough, you would certainly not want to drop this lens by accident. There is no image stabilization on the lens, unfortunately. There's a drop-in filter slot for using 46mm filters, and you can turn those filters using a handy control ring next to the slot, useful for polarizing filters. And that's all followed by the zoom ring, which works firmly but very smoothly, turning the opposite way to Canon's zoom lenses. The focus ring can be turned at any time, and it works very smoothly indeed. It turns about 170 degrees, which sounds quite far, but actually that is not really precise enough to easily focus the lens manually. Then we see a very heavy-duty tripod mount. You can loosen it to twist the lens around, useful when you're attached to a tripod. The lens's hood clamps onto the front quite awkwardly, and it can be a bit fiddly to attach. The lens cap is made of fabric and slides on whichever way you're using the hood. The lens's autofocus mechanism is silent and works at an average speed. It was reasonably accurate in my tests, but it did miss occasionally. The minimum focus distance of the lens is about 6 meters. Overall, the Sigmonster really is a behemoth that will attract plenty of attention from people around you, wherever you might be using it. Alright, let's see if this old monster is optically powerful enough for a modern, full-frame camera, in this case a Canon 6D with its 20 megapixel sensor. At 300mm and f5.6, sharpness and contrast are quite good in the middle of the image frame. The image is just as good in the corners. Stop down to f8 for a little more sharpness there, and excellent sharpness back in the middle. Let's zoom the lens in quite far now to 600mm. It's the same story. Pretty nice sharpness and contrast at f5.6 in the middle, but the corners now look slightly the worse for wear. Stop down to f8 for a good deal more sharpness and brightness there, and again, excellent image quality in the middle. Finally, 800mm. In the centre of the image we see good resolution, which is unfortunately obstructed by lower contrast and ghosting. So the lens is finally struggling. Or is it? Over in the corners, the image is a little softer in terms of resolution, but also far clearer. This is a hint to me that this copy of the lens was slightly decentered. Well, whatever the problem is, stop down to f8 for an improvement in those corners and very good image quality back in the middle. At f11, there is just a touch of further sharpness. Overall, on a full-frame camera, the lens churns out some pretty sharp images, albeit not record-breakingly so. There was a slip-up at 800mm and f5.6, but I imagine that in a properly centered lens, you would see a slightly better performance. And now, APS-C. This should be very challenging for the Sigmonster, even with me testing it out on an older 18MP APS-C camera, the Canon 60D. At 300mm the lens is fairly sharp, straight from f5.6, from the middle into the edges. There is a minuscule improvement when you stop down to f8, not a bad start. At 600mm the lens is just okay at f5.6 from the middle and into the corners, although contrast levels are still quite acceptable. There's a small improvement at f8 in the corners, and back in the middle the image quality is also a touch better. Let's push things all the way now by zooming into 800mm. On an APS-C camera, this is the full-frame equivalent of 1280mm. On this copy of the lens, there was a ton of ghosting at f5.6 in the middle. The corners are noticeably soft, but the ghosting has mostly cleared up, which again suggests to me a centering problem with this particular copy of the lens. Stop down to f8 for a slight boost in contrast levels, although some mild chromatic aberration now becomes apparent. Back in the centre of the image, the ghosting is cleared up at f8, leaving us with image quality that is just sharp enough to be useful. There's another slight improvement at f11, and the corners especially look much better. So, on a more difficult APS-C camera, the Sigmonster's optics are really being pushed, but in the end is generally able to yield acceptable image quality, even good image quality when the lens is topped down to f8. Let's look now at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. Sorry for the blurry test chart at 300mm, the lens's minimum focus distance was a bit too long for me in this case. Throughout the entire zoom range, the lens shows a little pincushion distortion. At 300mm we see just a little vignetting at f5.6 right in the edges, but stop down to f8 and it's almost gone. When we zoom in to the telephoto end to 800mm, we see much stronger vignetting, which falls quite gently across the image frame. This will have the effect of slightly darkening your backgrounds, and it'll be noticeable when you're shooting birds against a blue sky. Stop down to f8 though, and you'll get even brightness again. When it comes to working against bright lights, you should try to use the lens's hood in sunny conditions. Flaring and interesting patterns will pop up very easily when bright lights enter the frame. Let's see now about the lens's bokeh. The sheer focal length of this lens ensures you can get some deeply out of focus backgrounds. There are no problems with the bokeh, although with difficult backgrounds things are not perfectly smooth. Well, anyway, the Sigmonster is showing its age a little these days, but for professional wildlife photographers, I think it's still a relevant option. It's handy to zoom out to 300mm to get a feel for your surroundings, and there's nothing quite like zooming all the way into 800mm to finally catch your subject. You can be really far away from whatever you're shooting. The resolution and general picture quality of the lens is pleasing, although not especially impressive on modern digital cameras. Still, it's a viable and fun option, a good lens to hire for a few days shooting.